Hello and welcome. I'm Srinivasan and this is Talking Sense with Srini. Today, Narendra Modi becomes India's longest serving elected Prime Minister in history, crossing the record held by Jawaharlal Nehru. 12 years, 3 elections, and one dominant personality. In that time, India has become the world's sixth largest economy, built infrastructure at scale like never before, and projected itself on the global stage quite firmly. It has also seen democratic institutions tested, inequality widen, and its neighborhood grow more turbulent. So, what have the Modi years actually meant for India, politically, economically, and on the world stage? Joining us to decode this is our editor in chief, Srinivasan. So let me begin with you. Modi won 3 consecutive elections, general elections there, but in 2024 was a bit of a shock for him because he was short of majority and he has to certainly rely on allies to form the government there. And it seems like in fact the largest state of Uttar Pradesh swung against him, but the party has been able to do really well in the subsequent election. The most recent one being in West Bengal, where history has been scripted. So, what do you think about Modi's model of winning elections? You think the centralized, personality driven continues to be the most formidable force as far as Indian politics is concerned?
Since we are going to have an assessment of what has happened in the last 12 years and now the 13th year, we are discussing Modi and what he has done and what he has achieved for this country. Essentially, when we do this comparison, he's a 15 Prime Minister India have seen. So from Jawaharlal Nehru to now Modi now. So essentially, this comparison is with the first Prime Minister.
That's right, yeah.
Because that's been a kind of a bugbear for Modi and others. That the longest serving, the epitaph was always with Jawaharlal Nehru, and therefore this is a major mental milestone for the entire right-wing stock, and therefore it is a special celebration for them. But then we have to look at what is that has been achieved in those. In these, dozen years and more. What is it this country has received? What is the kind of transformation it has happened? Before coming to your particular issue of whether he has consolidated his electoral machinery, before that, let's look at what he has done. I think one of the biggest transformation which he has managed to bring is to convert India, what it stood, the way it was envisaged immediately after independence, to become a secular, democratic republic where all communities, religion, all are more inclusive. From that, what he has now done in these 12 or 13 years is to convert India into a different mindset. Mm-hmm. That basically a civilizational transformation is what he has been saying. So the thing here is, from being a kind of country which was envisaged during independence to a nation now where it is Hindu majoritarian first, and that's the kind of a transformation he has managed to bring about in these 10, 12 years. Now, 12 years and more. Now, how much of it has happened is a question wide open, because there would be critics who would say, look, more or less, it's, most minds have agreed to this. There are some who could have resigned to the fact that it has happened, but there are others who could believe that no, it hasn't completely changed. So that's a different question. But if one has to ask what is a major achievement, I think this is one major achievement at a political plane, which I think Modi seemed to have addressed. Now, coming to electoral thing, his Jagannath moved very well in 2014. In 2019, again, it moved very well. 2024, he met his first major obstacle. Right. I think the obstacle more from outside, it came from within. It wasn't as if the opposition managed to completely, make him, bite the, the dust. Yes, opposition got revived. Especially the opposition leader Rahul Gandhi started with Bharat Jodo Yatra, and he ran a counter campaign of more inclusive politics. He said the nation needed to be brought together, and he made constitution as a biggest rallying point. Yes, it did receive a good traction, and the party could gain, and they got about 100 seats, 99 to 100 now. Now, but the jolt more than Congress party from outside, it came from within for the BJP, because there was some dissonance between the RSS and BJP, and it was said that several RSS workers did not work as hard as they did in the previous elections, because there was a feeling that a personality cult was overtaking what essentially needs to be an ideological transformation. I think Prime Minister and his Deputy Number 2, Amit Shah, quickly grasped the situation. They did a course correction, and the electoral juggernaut was always very powerful. What they have tried to do in the subsequent 2 years is to consolidate their ground. Since the next parliamentary election is only in 2029,
That's right.
they use this period to consolidate themselves in the states. And look at what has happened. They have almost politically covered 80% of India. I mean, geographically, 80% of Indian territory is now held by, BJP ruled state governments. They're only about 15 to 20%, which is being held by non-BJP opposition or opposition ruled states, about 20%. The other thing which he managed is assembly after assembly, BJP won. So the first one, Haryana, if you look at parliament polls, only 50% vote share, 50% number of seats he could win, because 5 out of 10. And in the assembly subsequently, his party BJP could manage 48 out of 90 assembly seats. So which means they recovered the ground. Maharashtra again, in parliament they only had 17 seats out of 48, but then they managed to come out with a majority, 132 out of 288. So what has happened is, during these 2 years, so let me list all the states: Haryana, Maharashtra, Delhi, Odisha, J&K, West Bengal, Assam, now Puducherry. So the latest being West Bengal, which seemed to be, which is clearly a feather in the cap of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, because this was ideologically a great victory for them. Earlier it was ruled by left, earlier Congress, then left for another 30 years, and then Mamata Banerjee another 15 years, and then now she's been defeated. So that's a major achievement for him, and that's how. But then there is something else which is majorly transformed. All these electoral wins are not without any controversy. I think we need to remember that very clearly. It started with vote chori complaint in Haryana elections. And then later, Bihar, it becomes intensified when SIR was brought in. In West Bengal, the chorus changed to what is called, within SIR, a new element. What happened in the case of West Bengal is removal of what they call as logical discrepancy. That's a new thing they added. So this has been seen as something which is beyond a normal electoral practice, some of these things, and become extremely controversial, and the election commission has come under cloud more and more. So it seems that BJP, which earlier gave a slogan that we want to see Congress Mukt Bharat, seem to be heading very fast towards opposition Mukt Bharat. You see the kind of route which opposition parties have seen, not just Congress, even non-Congress opposition have seen similar routes in almost all the states, particularly which you can see in Orissa and West Bengal. These are the states which are held very strongly with BJP, non-Congress opposition leaders. There is a different story in Telangana and a very different story in Tamil Nadu, what you recently saw. That whole thing we have to keep in mind while going through the electoral achievements of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, earlier, this competitive edge was restricted to Lok Sabha and assembly elections. Now, what you see, a new trend is now the fight is getting extended into Rajya Sabha too. The Rajya Sabha elections are also becoming controversial. So it seems that BJP is in a great hurry before 2029 elections to consolidate itself further, whereas it has at least, they already have, I think, just about 2/3 majority in Rajya Sabha, also have a grand majority in Lok Sabha.
Now, Article 370 is scrapped, CAA passed, Ram Mandir built, and UCC and delimitation is something that we're expecting to happen in the next couple of years. So critics call it a systematic remaking of India's institutional architecture, while supporters call it this has been a long time coming. It's long pending correction. So 12 years on, you think the idea of India permanently altered, and you think is this alteration reversible in a way?
See, all these things which you mentioned is again coming back to the same thing, is transforming the Nehruvian model of
Governance?
secularism to very aggressive national majoritarianism. So these are the steps which are necessary to bring about these changes, and which started with Article 370. So what is Article 370? Basically, Article 370 was when when special privileges which are given to Jammu Kashmir, which was agreed upon when Jammu Kashmir signed the instrument of accession with India. So it was one of the conditions there that they will have their own constitution and they will have their own flag, and that has been removed now. So in that sense, it's been mainstreamed. But then there is another political story behind it. The story is why such a privilege was given. See, when the merger happened, it was under Maharaja Hari Singh, but it was the only one state in India which has, Muslim majority as compared to all other states in India. So it was a different state. And for a long time, like I said earlier, this entire project of converting into majoritarian, this is one essential factor that has to be taken into consideration, that this distinction were to go. But then officially there are other things which is being said. Why this was done? So to bring down terrorism, to bring in more development, so that non-domicile people could buy property there. So all those things were stated as other reasons. Now, what has been the achievement? One has to go back, revisit that place and see what are the various changes happened. But many of these, see, if you had to look at what happened in Balakot, what happened in Pahalgam, terrorism hasn't completely gone. It keeps revisiting in various forms. So this is one major thing we have to remember, that Article 370 was also, if it is it's a main thing on the agenda, it's also is a political project. The next is, you mentioned about Ram Mandir. Now, the building of Ram Mandir is again, it's a kind of a civilizational milestone for BJP, that to assert that it's basically a Hindu predominant India, where Hindus themselves are not being given the kind of place which they should be given. I mean, that's been the grouse of right wing, and they've been constantly saying it, articulating it for over the years. Now, it majorly helped to bring BJP, which was actually in the fringes, mind you, I'm saying fringes, to mainstream, and not just mainstream, dominating Indian politics now. So in 1984, they get only about 2 seats. Later, after the Ram Janmabhoomi, they could, shore up to about 85 seats. And then subsequent elections, they grew very fast. So Ram Janmabhoomi on its own is a temple project, which was actually what? It was an old mosque where it was in the name of Babar. The claim was made that, the Ram Lala, the child Ram was born there, and therefore it is very sacrosanct to Hindus. So that was the main narrative, and then it went to court, and finally the judgment came, giving it in favor of the majority community, and that's what has happened. So therefore, in that sense, a Ram Mandir represents that civilizational transformation which this regime wants. Again, uniform civil code, delimitation, these are all continuation of the same theme. I think we need to keep in mind, like I said earlier, that political leaders or prime ministers take decisions based on existing social political reality. So whatever Nehru took decision, those decisions were governed by the thinking of those days. And what today is happening is the decisions which are being taken by today's existing political, sociological changes and the belief the society is in, and that's what has happened.
Let's discuss a little bit on the foreign policy front as well. How do you see Modi has fared on this? We just had a conflict with Pakistan, and uh, Bangladesh had a political rupture. Sri Lanka nearly collapsed, and now it's getting back. Maldives briefly pivoted to China, and now it's back. Sort of flirting with India in a way. And Nepal is almost unpredictable there. So for all the talk of neighbourhood first policy the Modi government was sticking on, India's immediate neighbourhood seems more unstable than it was in 2014. Can you still claim yourself as a Vishwa Guru?
Look, India is a large country, and its neighbors are, all the neighbors you mentioned are small, both in size, economic heft, and military power, strategic powers. So there has been always a kind of a disbalance between the relationship. It's not an equal relationship. Pakistan is a different case, we know that. So it's not as if we are seeing this scenario only after 2014. India had problem with its neighbors earlier also. Now, because of the particular change in geopolitical situation, and there is economic pulls and pressure. For instance, China is very keen to get into Sri Lanka. China is actively promoting, certain disturbance in the northeastern borders on the other side. So because of these changes, the challenges have become far more tougher. So if it wasn't as if these are new challenges, which has always been there, and the relationship with India, with its neighbor, has been unequal because of the reasons which I mentioned earlier. So that's a big thing. So a big issue. So they always, and India wants its neighbor strategically under its control, because it in a way it extends your own security network beyond your borders. So you would like to see more cooperative and friendly neighbors. But then, like I said, there are other competing issues which come into play. That's what we are seeing. But the bigger question is not just neighboring policy. What is India's outlook vis-a-vis the world? If you have to go by the popular narrative, Indians now feel that they get better respect when they travel abroad. But are we punching which is equal to our weight? I would certainly say no. Look, India always took a very high moralistic position, and this morality had come because of Gandhi, someone who could get freedom simply without using any arms, through peaceful means. And he brought in a new moral character, not just to India, to the entire world, and that's why he is quoted all over. Nehru followed that, and therefore India's foreign policy was very much guided by those. So anywhere in any part of the world, anything happened, India would raise its voice. Any inequality, any major killings or anything, it would raise its voice. So for instance, once when Western countries got very irritated, Nehru was supposed to have given a reply that we may be poor, but we have a point of view. We'll certainly say that. That's the kind of attitude India had. But then things have changed, as I said. There's a new reality now. The unipolarity has now getting into multipolarity. America is not as strong as it was. There is a rise of China. So the challenges are far more today than it was during Nehru's period. That we have to admit. But then India, on the one hand, is it tactical, or is it that it lacks courage to speak out on things? But certainly the critics certainly point out these issues, and these are significant issues. That when the trade deal was happening, the trade negotiations of India and the United States, it's the American president could impose tariffs left, right, and center. Now, he could do it to China, he could do it to Europe, and he could do it to India also. But India didn't say anything. There was no outward protest on those issues. Similarly, other than the trade issue, what we saw happening with the various conflicts, the Palestinian issue there. Again, what happened in Venezuela. Overnight a president was picked out and brought in as almost like a criminal. India didn't have much to say on that. Or what you now see, conflict with Iran. And when the entire world was actually watching helplessly, everyone in this world wants the war to end. And there is no voice yet which could say why Trump is doing this. Because I think foreign policy is also now become, one has to see what is that you get out of it. Self-interest, yeah, if you have to say your own self-interest, which takes center stage. Probably that is the reason that, India is quiet about it. But this is not what we were in the past. So maybe in the current circumstances, the wisdom in Delhi would be that to safeguard our own self-interest, we must keep our own counsel. But then you see what happened. The energy crisis, and it's one of the biggest crises staring in our face. India imports 85% of fuel from abroad. Much of that comes from the Gulf states, and Iran was one major, contributor to that. And in this war, even that has got muddled now. So there are lots of other things which has happened, which seem to think that in a broader global perspective, has India has lost its sheen.
All right. One last question there, sir. On the economic front, India is the fastest growing major economy now, but yet it cannot generate enough formal jobs for the 7.8 million, young people entering the workforce each year. So manufacturing never scaled the way we expected, despite the production-linked incentives and Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat and so on. So you think, is this a policy failure, or is this something something structurally wrong?
You're right when you mentioned about manufacturing. We are still, as a percentage of GDP, manufacturing is only about 15%. But largely our, we are running on an engine which is fueled by services, which is more than the major contribution. Nearly 60% comes from services. Agriculture, very little it contributes. In terms of employment, 50% of India is still employed in agriculture, whereas as a contribution to GDP is very less. The rest of the other services add to another 20 to 30% to employment. So, which is a major problem with the economy. So what is happening is, while the government is constantly talking about GDP growth, which is basically doing very well. But the caveat is major economy. Among the major economies, we are doing well. So GDP growth rate is fine. But then what kind of growth rate it is? Because you see, GDP again is the aggregate GDP, which is basically, it's a collective production of the entire country. But it doesn't, this aggregate GDP doesn't mean collective prosperity. That has to be measured in terms of per capita income. So if you look at that, then we are far below. So let me give you some data. So when it comes, India is the fourth largest economy, 4 trillion plus, when GDP is measured on nominal terms. But then it changes if you have to divide with a massive population of 147 crores, what we have. So the GDP per capita is what we have is about 3,000 at the most, $3,000, and globally we are about 136th. Okay. So look at Japan. They have a population of only 123 million. Therefore, they have a per capita income of $33,900. 33,900 is their GDP. China 13,000. US is 89,000. So we still have to cover a lot of ground. So GDP doesn't give that complete picture. But before I go further, let me say, if you have to count some of the achievements of this government, correctly, as you said earlier, infrastructure has been a good story. So the entire infrastructure growth, which is road, airports,
bridges,
all those. I mean, a whole lot of those things have happened. Swachh Bharat is another thing which this government is very proud of and which has given toilets. So these are earlier only in private sector. Toilets, construction toilet, giving subsidies for that, or giving LPGs to women so that they free themselves from the pollution in their kitchen, because earlier largely cooking was happening using wood as fuel, and that was causing a lot of distress. So changing from that, transforming from that, and these are the changes which this government has done. Again, electricity connectivity, which was about 88% brought down to 99.6% or some such number. So these are some of the major achievements. Also, Jan Dhan scheme, which they said basically Aadhaar as an identity.
Jam Trinity.
Yeah, it has been linked to bank accounts.
Jandan accounts and then mobile.
So, and that has actually direct benefit transfer is reduced the leakages, which was earlier a major bugbear. Whatever social programs, DBT is very useful. And you could say this digital transformation has resulted in people could now even trade, buy bananas, a dozen banana you can buy for 20 rupees, and you can still do digital transformation. So as less as that, 5 rupees transaction you can do. So digital convenience has certainly changed a whole lot of things. So these are some of the major achievements of this government. But then on the other hand, if you look at where we are, slipping, is foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment. So if you look at foreign portfolio investment, Indian equity is worth $29.5 billion have been sold so far this financial year, as opposed to only about $18 billion last year, full 12 months.
That's right.
So basically the FPI is really rushing out of India. The other story is foreign direct investment. FDI is not coming to India. If you look at net FDI, it's basically outflow. There is more FDI going out than coming in. I mean, that's a major area of concern. So what has happened is India is no longer popular among global investors. That's one major fix this government will have to do. How to bring back foreign direct investment, how to bring back foreign portfolio investments and other investments. There are certain measures which has been taken recently, but then the complaint is that the number of reforms in last 2 years, why politically, like I said earlier, there's been a major gain, and election after election, state after state, BJP has won under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but then the economy has been slipping out of their grip. So the concentration seems to be largely on the political side of it. What actually has they seem to have taken the eye off the ball is economy. And that's what some of the economists have been complaining. The last one you heard was Surjit Balla, who is actually pretty close to this regime. Even he has begun to complain that this is one major thing we should look at it. The other reputation of India, which is problematic, which is growing, is that we are not so much in favor of AI, as if we are not very friendly with AI. See, India is now turning out to be a country which perhaps will be the world's largest user of AI, but not having its own AI development. This is something which we had a problem earlier also, that we, pre-independence, post-independence, what we heard, India was tapped as a raw material. We'll export cotton from here, it will go to Britain and then come back as turned into cloth. So similar thing is happening now. We don't have our own AI model. We don't have our own, which is other major countries have. Even China has, in fact, China is racing ahead, even ahead of United States in some regions. Europe and America are far ahead. So that's another major reason for India's situation right now. The third thing is trade. Again, various trade agreements like bilateral trade agreements.
That's right. India-EU trade.
Yeah, so that's another major bugbear. So these are the major fixes and lack of reforms. According to one global study, there were only 2 reforms in last 2 years. Land acquisition is still a major problem. So these are the major issues which is preventing inflow of global finances into India. Other major issue which are facing trouble right now is the you know rupee getting weaker.
That's right.
Because because of the global factors. So that's another major, and the biggest of all is the energy crisis. So apparently during 90s there was an attempt made, and this is from an interview by Manishankar Iyer when he was a petroleum minister, to bring down India's energy dependence from 85% to about 70%. I think it has now gone back to about 85% plus. So that's another major area of concern. And a developing country like India, which has aspiration to become a major economy and developed nation, it requires a whole lot of energy. So the diversification of energy, some of these things are being tried. And various sources, not just depend on fossil fuels, various other kinds of, which is basically nuclear and other things also, solar, nuclear. So that's one major area which this government need to work.
All right, sir. Very insightful talking to you. Thank you very much.